In this video we're going to talk about how the mind is a subtle body for the soul and how the mind carries the soul after death, and it's going to be quite interesting reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. Let me quickly show you how this is done. You either go on the Vedabase app or you can go and visit the website at vedabase.io, and there you have access to a whole bunch of spiritual books. We're going to go to Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, or Book 4, Chapter 29, and Text 61. Talks between Narada Muni and King Prachini Bari. So you get free access to all these books, and I'm going to put a link in the description also about where you can buy a copy of the book, because having an actual copy of the book on your bookshelf at home, the book itself has such a spiritual presence in your home. It's another level. Text 61. Here we go. So, Srimad Bhagavatam. There you can see the Devanagari, the Sanskrit, and then the transliteration. Shayanam imam utshriya shvasantam purusho yata karmatmanya ahitam bhunkte tadrishene tarena va. And these books are generally in the form of a song. Why is the screen stuck? Lovely. Shayanam imam utshrijya shvasantam purusho yata karmatmanya hitam bhunkte tadrishene tarena va. Then you have the synonyms, the word for word meaning, and then the translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Obviously, it's very important that the meaning of the verses are not changed, that there's no interpretation, but there's actually a purport, just giving the meaning, the natural meaning of what's being said here. And these books are presented in an unbroken chain of disciplic succession, the Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya, Vaishnav, Sampradaya, or disciplic succession. The living entity, while dreaming, gives up the actual living body. Through the activities of his mind and intelligence, he acts in another body, either as a god or a dog. After giving up this gross body, the living entity enters either an animal body or demigod's body on this planet or on another planet. He thus enjoys the results of the actions of his past life. Right, the mind and intelligence, the subtle body. Right. So this phenomenon takes place even when we are asleep. That's what this is saying. It's quite interesting. The phenomenon of leaving the body, which is what we call death. Of course, people think that death means you stop living, but actually death just means that you leave the body, which is now no longer fit to house you. It's like your lease agreement is up. You need to vacate the premises, but you continue to live. Purport. Although the root of distress and happiness is the mind, intelligence and ego, a gross body is still required as an instrument of enjoyment. You have the gross body and the subtle body. The subtle body is mind, intelligence and ego, becoming progressively more subtle. Mind, intelligence and ego is the subtle body, but a gross body is still required as an instrument of enjoyment. The gross body may change, but the subtle body continues to act. You take the subtle body goes with you life after life. It's the same mind that's been with you in innumerable lifetimes. Just think of how conditioned the mind is to material life. The gross body changes, but then the mind carries the soul to the next body. Unless the living entity gets another gross body, he will have to continue in a subtle body or a ghostly body. That's also interesting. That's what ghosts are. It's the soul in a subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego. Ego means sense of identity. Who am I? And no gross body. That's why ghosts are generally very frustrated, because they don't have senses to enjoy, but they're not pure. So their minds are still attracted to sense gratification, but now they don't have a body to enjoy that. So very frustrating. One becomes a ghost when the subtle body acts without the help of the instrumental gross body. As stated in this verse, Shayanam imam utsrijya shvasatam. The gross body may lie in a bed and rest. And even though the machinery of the gross body is working, the living entity may leave, go to a dream, and return to the gross body. Very interesting. And sometimes people have outer body experience where they become conscious of their actual situation while they are outside of their body. When he returns to the body, he forgets his dream. Similarly, when the living entity takes on another gross body, he forgets the present gross body. Imagine if we remembered all our past lives and how we died and all that. It would be completely traumatic. So there's a good system in place that you don't remember all of the past bodies. Unfortunately, we have to get the karmic reactions, though, of whatever we did back then. And that's why sometimes it's very confusing. That why is this happening to me? I don't remember and having ever done anything to have deserved this. But that's because you forget your past life. The conclusion is that the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego creates an atmosphere with desires and ambitions that the living entity enjoys in the subtle body. Actually, the living entity is in the subtle body, even though the gross body apparently changes, and even though he inhabits the gross body on various planets. All the activities performed by the living entity in the subtle body are called illusory because they are not permanent. Liberation means getting out of the clutches of the subtle body. Now imagine you think the dream is real. And similarly, we think this material existence is real. It's permanent. This is our existence. But we leave the body at the end of life. So it's not real. It's illusory because it's non-permanent. Because the soul is permanent, everything non-permanent is kind of like illusory. It doesn't have real existence, permanent existence. Even something that lasts 100 years, it's like nothing in eternal time, in eternal existence. In terms of eternality, it's like nothing. It's almost like illusory. Although right now it's real, but not ultimately real. Liberation means getting out of the clutches of the subtle body. Liberation from the gross body simply involves the transmigration of the soul from one gross body to another. Getting liberated from the gross body, so easy. Just wait till you die. Then you leave the gross body. Getting liberated, getting free from it. But getting liberated or getting free from the subtle body, that is the real trick. Getting free from material desires. It means we have to develop spiritual desires, because desires will be there. You cannot have no desires. It's a function of the mind, thinking, feeling, and willing. When the mind is educated in Krishna consciousness, God consciousness, or higher consciousness in the mode of goodness, one is transferred either to the upper heavenly planets or to the spiritual world, Vaikuntha planets. One therefore has to change his consciousness by cultivating knowledge received from the Vedic instructions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the disciplic succession. Yes, that's very important, because then the message doesn't get changed. Disciplic succession. Disciple means discipline. So whatever they hear from their guru, They don't change it. They don't interpret it and think, oh, I think this means this. No, you just give the actual meaning that the guru has given you. And the guru is a disciple. And it goes back and further and further and further until you reach the original instructor, who is God. So if that is the case, that you have an unbroken chain of disciplic succession of disciplined teachers that don't change the message, then you can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be understood by mental speculation. God is too big to fit into our tiny brains. We simply have to give the understanding that has been presented. And a descending process of knowledge. Ascending means you try to understand things by your sensory perception. Descending means you receive information from a higher source. It's not about what you know, but it's about who you know in spiritual life. If we train the subtle body, meaning mind, intelligence, and sense of identity, in this life, by always thinking about Krishna, we will transfer to Krishna Loka. Krishna Loka means the planet of Krishna, the spiritual world where God resides, after leaving the gross body. This is confirmed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yoveti tatvata Jaktvadeham punarjanma naiti mameti sorjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode. Or Arjuna, Bhagavad Gita 4.9. Thus the change of the gross body is not very important, but the change of the subtle body is important. The Krishna consciousness movement is educating people to enlighten the subtle body. The perfect example in this regard is Ambarish Maharaj, who always engaged his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo. Similarly, in this life, we should always fix our mind on the lotus feet of Krishna, who is present in his Archa Vigraha, the incarnation of the deity in the temple. We should also always engage in his worship. If we engage our speech in describing the activities of the Lord and our ears in hearing about his pastimes, and if we follow the regulative principles to keep the mind intact by advancing in Krishna consciousness, we shall certainly be elevated to the spiritual platform. Then, at the time of death, the mind, intelligence, and ego will no longer be materially contaminated. The living entity is present, and the mind, intelligence, and ego are also present. When the mind, intelligence, and ego are purified, all the active senses of the living entity become spiritual. Thus the living entity attains his Satchit Ananda form. The Supreme Lord is always in his Satchit Ananda form, but the living entity, although part and parcel of the Lord, becomes materially contaminated when he desires to come to the material world for material enjoyment. The prescription for returning home back to Godhead is given by the Lord himself. The prescription, like a doctor prescribing medicine. What is the process? What is the medicine that I need to take to get out of this material world? Being in a diseased condition, the soul is in a diseased condition in this material world because it is caught up in ignorance and caught up in material sense gratification and material desires. There's a diseased condition for the soul, the pure Satchit Ananda soul, full of knowledge, full of bliss and eternal. When that soul is in this material, temporary place of misery, then it is in a diseased condition. So the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 9:34, Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhya jimam namaskuru mamivaishyasi yuktavaivam atmana madparayana. Always think of me and become my devotee. Worship me and offer your homage unto me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. So the subtle body needs to be purified. The subtle body can help us to build a bridge from this world to the spiritual eternal existence. And the subtle body is what keeps us bound up in the material world. But the material bodies may change. Just like you go to sleep every night, you have a different dream. But the material body might change, but the mind carries the soul to the next life. If the mind, whatever the mind desires, whatever it is thinking, feeling, and willing, whatever the desires are there in the mind, that's where you go after death. That's where you will end up in the material world again. But if the mind is purified, if you think about God, then you'll go to God. Like that, and you can become free from this illusory existence. Every life that you're in, it's like another illusory existence, like having another dream. But if you go back to your internal spiritual existence, you become free from that. And in the spiritual world, you don't have a mind. In the spiritual world, you don't have... It's just you. Whereas in the material world, you have two coverings. The soul is within the heart, in the region of the heart, literally. And the symptom of the soul consciousness is spread throughout the body in the blood, through the blood. That's your gross covering. Then you have the subtle covering, which also needs to be purified. And the subtle covering is the mind, intelligence, and false ego. And these two coverings, you become free from them when you return to the spiritual world. Yeah. And then you manifest your Satchit Ananda form, your spiritual form. And you exist in full knowledge, eternally in bliss. But you don't just exist by yourself, you exist with God and all of the other devotees, and you have fun. You have fun times, happy days. Alright, so there you go. That's a little taster of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Some of the details that you can get in this wonderful book. This one talks about the spiritual, not the spiritual, it talks about the mind and intelligence and the subtle body and how it carries the soul. Yeah, here you can see some of the other books, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita. It also has multiple volumes. Nectar of Devotion, Krishna's Pastimes, Nectar of Instruction, very good book. Yeah, so this, as you could see in the beginning, is very easy to navigate, but I'll put a link in the description of how to get the actual book as well. If you have any questions, let me know.